Nedarim Daf Yud Zayin begins with a Mishnah that introduces another comparison between Nedarim and Shavuos. The Gemara will have a Machlokes Amoraim what the correct case of the Mishnah is, and then we'll bring three proofs to that Machlokes. So let's begin. The Mishnah, as we've seen in our last Mishnah, we're comparing Nedarim and a Shavua, a Neder, which is a vow, and a Shavua, which is somebody swearing to something. So this Mishnah introduces another difference between the two, and it says that a neder can take effect on top of another neder. Not always, but there is at least some kind of neder that can take effect on top of another one. While a shvua cannot take effect on top of another shvua, because the rule is ein shvua chal al shvua. Somebody who's already sworn to something, he cannot swear to it again. He's already obligated to it. There is no meaning to having him obligated to it a second time. So the Mishnah introduces the case where you could have a neder bichal on top of another neder, and the cases where somebody takes a vow of Nazirus and he takes another vow of Nazirus on top of it. Now he says, "Behold, I am a Nazir," and then he says again, "Behold, I am a Nazir." Now the case of the Mishnah, he says that I'm a Nazir on the condition that I eat a certain thing. Now that's not really relevant to the Mishnah's case. The Mishnah doesn't need that to make the point that you can make one vow of Nazirus on top of another one. The Rishonim have a girsa that the Gemara asks, why is it here? And the Gemara just says, it's here because if he were to just say it once, say I take a vow of Nazirus if I eat this, and then eat two kizesim of it, that would also be chal Nazirus twice. That's an extra chiddush, but that's not really the point of our Mishnah. Now, at the same time, the Mishnah says if somebody takes two shavuos, he says, I swear I'm not going to eat something. And then he says, again, I swear I'm not going to eat something. There's no relevance to that. It's only one shavua. Now, the case where you may think that there's relevance would be that if he violates, he has to bring two korbanos for violating both shuas. But he doesn't. He only has to bring one. There's no significance to the second shua. Now, what's the significance of having two vows of Nazirus? That is, they both take effect at the same time. However, you can't fulfill them both at the same time. Being a Nazir only works for one and not the other. So the standard Nazirus period is 30 days, and after the 30 days end, he has to start working on the second Nazirus, and he has to be a Nazir for another set of 30 days. Now, the Rishonim point out that this only works for Nazirus. If somebody makes a neder, I'm not going to eat something, and he makes another neder, I'm not going to eat something, those are not chal one on top of the other, and in that way, Nazirus is the same as Shvua. The Mishnah's point is just that there exists a type of neder, which refers to Nazirus, that because it's limited to 30 days, you could have it take effect one on top of the other. Okay, that's the Mishnah. Now the Gemara has a machlokes to what exactly he said. According to Shmuel, it's exactly the way we saw it. He says, I'm going to be a Nazir. Then he says, again, I'm going to be a Nazir. Two vows of Nazirus, one exactly the same as the other. One is chal on top of the other, and he has to keep them one after the other. According to Rav Huna, that would not work in that case. If both Naziruses line up directly on top of the other, and none of them overlap and stick out, it's not chal more than once. The case has to be where he says, first I'm going to be a Nazir today, and then he says I'm going to be a Nazir starting tomorrow. So the second Nazir started a day later, and therefore it ends a day later. Therefore it has to extend a day later than his first Nazirus, because that day exists beyond the first day. You have a Nazirus for the second time at least one day. And the rule is whenever you have a Nazirus for one day, it automatically grows to be a full 30 days. And that's the only scenario in which you could have a Nazirus on top of a Nazirus. However, if they line up exactly, he starts two Naziruses at the same time, that would not take effect. There will be just one Nazirus, would not have to keep the two of them. Now the Gemara is going to try to bring three proofs against Rav Huna. The Gemara's first proof is from our Mishnah. The Gemara asks, why do we have to compare Nazirus, why do we have to compare Neder and Shvua, and say that a Neder could exist one on top of the other, while Shvua cannot? Let's just talk about Shvua. Even within Shvua, let's just talk about the Neder, that is. Even within the Neder, you could compare Neder to Neder. You could compare Nazirus that starts today, you could compare two sets of Nazirus that start today where they're not chal one on top of the other, to two sets of Nazirus, one starts today and one starts tomorrow where they are chal on top of the other. What are we bringing in Shvua? Now, the Ran points out that the Gemara here is not asking a classic lifli v'lisni b'didei, because the Mishnah obviously wants to compare Neder and Shvua. The way the Ran explains this is that the implication of the Gemara that Nazirus is always chal, one on top of the other for the Neder, but not for Shvua, that's wrong. It's misleading. It's not always. It's only sometimes, and that's only depending on how you say it. Now, that's kind of similar to the Gemara's second proof, which we'll see soon. So that's the Gemara's kasha. The Gemara doesn't have an answer. The Gemara says, okay, it's a kasha. The Gemara doesn't seem too impressed with it. The Gemara doesn't feel that this fully rejects Rav Huna's position. So therefore, the Gemara, without answering, moves on to its second proof. Now, the second proof is from this Mishnah as well. The Mishnah says, okay, you compared Neder of Naziris to Shua. The two cases have to match. What is the case of Shua that matches the case of Naziris? Now, if the two Naziris line up one on top of the other, like Shmuel says, so then the case of Shua would be two Shuas that line up one on top of the other. He says, Shua, I'm not going to eat. Shua, I'm not going to eat. Shua, I'm not going to eat figs. So Shua, I'm not going to eat figs. Same exact thing. There, it makes sense for the Mishnah to say that the Shua is not Chal on top of the other Shua, while the Naziris is Chal on top of the other Naziris. According to Shmuel, it makes sense. However, according to Rav Huna, that the second Naziris overlaps the first Nazira and extends afterward, so that means that the Shua, the two Shuas, also have to overlap and extend beyond. It can't just be exactly the same. So what would that be? It would have to be that he swears I'm not going to eat figs, and then he swears I'm not going to eat grapes. It has to be something extra. It has to be something beyond this shua, just like the neder is a naziris that extends beyond this first naziris that he makes. Now, if that's true, you have a problem, because the Mishnah isn't correct in saying that the second shua is not chal on the first. It absolutely is. The first one was on figs, the second one is on grapes, and there's no reason why it shouldn't be chal. It's a totally different shua. And therefore, it's only the Mishnah only makes sense if you learn like Shmuel and not like Rav Huna. That's a proof to Shmuel. So the Gemara says Rav Huna answers, there you didn't learn the Mishnah correctly. When you compared it to Shua, you were supposed to come up with a case where the second Shua overlapped the first Shua. That means it lined up on top of it and it extended further. That's not what you did. You did a totally different one. You did the first one is figs and the second one is grapes. It's not correct. It should be as follows. The first one is figs. The second one is figs and grapes. That would be the case that lines up correctly. And in that case, I am right that the halacha is that the second shua is not chal on top of the first shua. And therefore, the Mishnah's ruling is absolutely correct in that scenario. And it really lines up the way I explained it, that the case of the Naziris was the first one was beginning today and the second one was beginning tomorrow. So Gemara follows up on this. The Gemara says that's all fine and good, but the problem is that it's not correct, his halacha. He said that in the case where he says a shvua first on figs and then on figs plus grapes, that the second shvua is chal on the first one. But Rabbah holds that it's not chal on the first one. And the Gemara quotes Rabbah's halacha where he says that it's not chal on the first one. The Gemara's assumption here is that when someone says a shua that I'm not going to eat figs plus grapes, it means I'm not going to eat both of them, but I'll possibly eat one of them. It's only if he eats both figs and grapes that he violates the shua. So Rabbi's case is as follows. Somebody who says that I swear that I'm not going to eat figs, and then he says, I swear that I'm not going to eat figs and grapes. So then he goes ahead and he eats figs. And that's a violation of the first shvua. And then he takes off a carbon. He's mafresh a carbon for that. So then he goes ahead and he eats grapes. So now, the question here is he chayev a carbon for eating the grapes? So Rabba's halacha is, since he was already mafresh carbon, that he ate figs the first time doesn't take any effect. That can't combine with the grapes that he ate the second time. They're broken up. And therefore he only ate grapes. Grapes is half the shvua. He didn't violate the shvua. The shvua was only that he won't eat figs plus grapes. But he didn't eat figs plus grapes. The figs that he ate don't count because there's already a carbon for that. He only ate grapes. That's not a violation. Clear implication here is that had he not been mafresh a carbon, then he would have been chayav a carbon a second time for the violation of the second shvua when he ate the grapes, because that combines with the figs that he already ate. Now he ate figs plus grapes and violated the second shvua. So that clearly shows that the second shvua is chal on the first shvua, and that is not like what Rabbi just told us. That is not like what Rav Huna just told us. Rav Huna just told us the second shvua is not chal on the first shvua, even though it sticks out and it overlaps. So then Rav Huna's answer doesn't work. So Gemara says, okay, that's Rabbah and Rav Huna. Rav Huna disagrees with Rabbah in this fact, and Rav Huna holds that this case works, and Rav Huna holds that this case does work, and Rabbah holds that it would not. All right, now the Gemara goes on to its third proof. This is from a different brisa, and it says that somebody who makes two vows of Naziris, if he counted the first one, then he set aside his carbon to exit the Naziris, which involves a number of carbonis. And after he set aside the carbon, he went and he was matir neder on the first Naziris. That means he did a full Naziris, and then he was matir neder on the Naziris, and now he didn't have to do that Naziris. So the Brisa Paskins, that Naziris that he did counts for his second vow of Naziris, and it works for the second one, and he doesn't have to do another Naziris for the second one, even though when he did the Naziris, he thought it was for the first one. Since he was matir neder for the first one, it was canceled. It works now for the second one, and he's fulfilled his term. Now the Gemara says, what's the case of here? What did he say exactly? If he said like Rav Huna said, that I'm a Nazir today and I'm a Nazir tomorrow, then why should it work for the second one? He didn't finish the days of the second one. The days of the second one only end the next day. So it's got to be that he lined them up directly on top of one on top of the other. And yet you see the second Naziris was Chal, because the only reason he doesn't have to do it is because the first days finished the second days. Proof against Rav Huna. So the Gemara answer is no. We're talking about where he said, I'm a Nazir today, and then he said, I'm a Nazir tomorrow. This is the Gemara's first answer. He said, I'm a Nazir today, I'm a Nazir tomorrow. Just like Rav Huna's case where he says it works. Why do we say that he finished that the days that he did works to fulfill his Naziris, he still owes a day? So the Gemara says, yeah, that's what we meant. It works for 29 out of the 30 days, but he still owes a day. Gemara's second answer is that there's a totally different way that he could have set up these two Nazirises, and that's that if he said in one sentence, I am a couple upon myself, two Naziris. Case like that, Rav Huna agrees works, because you don't have a second Naziris trying to be Chal on top of an existing first one. You have two taking effect at the same time. Those will work automatically, one and then followed by the other. So there you can have two, and the case of the Brisa then plays out just as it says. He fulfills the first one, matir neder, and then those days work for the second one.